This was 1959 in either late October or very early November, before deer season. We were headed generally kind of east on Bat Cave Loop. And there was a ranch house on the right, and the rancher was out by the gate with his pickup truck talking to somebody. And so I said, let's stop and talk to him. He told us about the Bat Cave, and he also said that back on the Weist Ranch, there's a cave back there that has a rock bridge over it, and it's natural. He called it Natural Bridge Cave. Well, deer season was over January 1st, and on the 3rd, we made our first trip out here. As I recall, 6 properties. The 6th property, or the 7th property, was Clara Weist's place. So we talked to Clara, and she wasn't too sure about letting us go on. She told us that it had been explored before. University of Texas had been there, some Boy Scouts, and then some other spelunkers from somewhere. One of them said it was just about 2 rooms in the cave, and then another one said they couldn't go very far, they reached the end, and blah, blah, blah. And there really wasn't much to it. But that isn't what our experience was.
We got to the cave and were real impressed. I mean, the natural sinkhole was real impressive. And all of us thought, you know, this has got to be part of a bigger cave.
We pushed through the entrance, which is 11 inches high at its low point, into a room which is slanting and curving to the right.
We went as far as we could go around to the right, and it pinched off. And then we turned around and came back into the room, and we saw that there was a low crawl out of that first room that led to the second room. When we got in there, we did look up to the right, or to the left rather, and we saw a passage going that way, but most cavers want to go as far down as they can get. So we noticed on the right-hand side of the room there was a slot that went down. So we climbed down into that slot, and it was a low, miserable crawlway, and then another little drop, and then you come to what we call was the keyhole, and it's a very, very tight opening that we crawled through that, got into another small room, and out of that room we had really 3 options, and we looked at one first, and it a little tight crawlway that went back to a real pretty little room that we call a Mayfield room, after Mayfield's cave, which is now Sonora, and very well decorated. There was another passage that looked like it was too tight to go through, and then there was a third one that we decided to take because it was sort of a stoopway. And that was what we later named the South Fault. And we went down that, and didn't reach the end of it, and we just finally got tired.
That was a shirt ripping, pants ripping.
Yeah.
Little, the passageway. You had to squeeze through, and the thing is, there were just these little slabs of rock just sticking
out, right.
Irregularly, and just tore at us every time we turned around.
So that's, you know, that pretty much ended that first trip, and we had concluded that this was a lot more cave than anybody had expected.
Way beyond the description.
So on the 4th trip, again, there were enough of us on the trip that we split up into 2 parties. And one party, again, was going to try to reach the end of the South Fault, because it just went and went and went. And Preston and I and Al and Joe Cantu, and this was Joe Cantu's, as far as I can recall, his first cave trip. He had just, you know...
He was just a starter,
Just a starter. And so he was tagging
the first
along
cave
with
he
us.
had ever been in. Yeah. And Al Brandt was very kind, very level-headed, generous.
Yeah.
Always lent his old 53 Ford for trips.
Yeah, he was the most mature of the group, as far as recognizing when we had reached our limit. Well, I started down that tight portion of it, and there were rocks in the floor, and I had a rock hammer with me. And so periodically I'd have to batter something out of the way so I could
Yeah,
continue.
sharp stuff sticking up.
And Preston came in behind me to that small room because I didn't want to go too far down that thing as bad as it looked and be alone back in there. So Preston came in behind me.
And you scooshed about 6 feet, and then I would scoosh about 6, and then you'd scoosh 6.
And eventually, you know, I looked up ahead and could see that suddenly there was no rock up ahead of us. It was just a black
started
hole.
opening, it started funneling out, which is great.
Yeah, and so I crawled on through and got into Pluto's anteroom. And I mean, compared to everything else we had seen, even in Natural Bridge to that point, it was huge. And so, and again, since we had to break our way basically through the crawlway into that room, we knew that we were the first people there. And
no footprints.
no footprints at all. Well, it was the biggest adrenaline rush that anybody could imagine, because once we got into the, I guess, Sherwood Forest, we realized that, you know, this was not an ordinary cave. It was absolutely amazing and just kept getting more amazing as we went forward. And so we were a bunch of college kids, so you can imagine the kind of antics that we were going through as far as hooping and hollering and talking about how great it was and so forth. And the most I remember is just the feeling that we had really found something that nobody had seen before, and probably the most spectacular cave in the state.
We were telling Joe Cantu as we sat there in the Castles of the White Giants that this is not your normal cave experience. Don't count on this. Well, funny thing is, he never went caving again.
I know. And we were seeing it totally different from what you see it nowadays. At that time, we were still pretty much with carbide lights and maybe a 2-cell flashlight. And so you never could see the whole thing lit up at once. It really wasn't until we took some photographs with multi-flash shots that we actually got a sense of what that room looked like entirely lit up.
The day of discovery on the 4th trip, we were like 8 hours late. And she was just petrified over us, you know, are the guys ever going to get out? Are they lost? Did something happen? But boy, when we came back, as muddy as we were, she knew we'd been somewhere. Yeah, and we were exhausted. But we were just chattering about this cave you have, this magnificent thing. It's as beautiful as Carlsbad. It's not quite as big, but it's more beautiful than Carlsbad.
It is. It was a life-changing experience.
It was all good.
It was all good. Everything that happened was good.
It's incredible.
Just seeing the hundreds of people going in, and you know, the knowledge that they're doing it because of what we managed to find. It's just a huge sense of reward.